Hi, welcome to Shashcode. My name is Liza Shashkova. I'm a software developer, and today we'll learn what's the difference between SQL and NoSQL databases. SQL means standard query language, so SQL database is a database with query language defined on it. SQL databases were developed in 1970s with a focus on reducing data duplication. So, in 1970s, storage was pretty expensive, and developers didn't want to store the same information 2 or 3 times in the same server. They wanted to optimize it somehow. So in SQL databases, data is structured, it has predefined rigid schema, and data is usually stored in tables. So there is some table name with column names and column values with some predefined types. And there are some relations between these tables, which are also defined by developer. SQL databases usually have a powerful query language. So you can create a query to create some table, or add, update, remove some data, or even join some tables if you have several instances of some data and you want to get some more complicated structure about several tables in your database. SQL databases are usually vertically scalable. That means that the data of the same table should be located on the same storage. So if you want to make your database even bigger, you just should buy a larger server and put the whole database here on this server. And SQL databases support ACID properties, where ACID means atomacy, consistency, isolation, and durability. So in general, that means that all the data which is stored in your database is up to date, is fully correct. Usually there are no data duplications, and this data, sometimes it may be slow, but the state of your database is fully correct. Here are examples of some SQL databases. Some of them are open source, some of them are developed by big corporations. So there are many, that's not, of course, not all the possible options. There are several other databases, but there are pretty many of them, because they were developed in 1970s, and since then there were created many different databases with query languages. NoSQL databases were developed in the beginning of the 21st century, and they were focused on scaling fast queries and allowing frequent application changes. So what does it mean? That means that data which is stored in NoSQL database is usually not structured. So schema is pretty dynamic. You can start working on your application, and later then you realize that you need to add some fields or change something. You can just update it, and your previous data still will be stored in the same database. And data can be stored in any possible format. It isn't necessarily a table. It can be a JSON document, or a graph, or a key value storage, or actually everything. And which is really cool, because the data model is flexible, and which is great. But one of the most important properties of such tables is horizontal scaling. So when you have a lot of data, like really a lot of data, usually you can't put all this data into one machine, into one server. And one of the most important advantages of NoSQL databases is horizontal scaling. That means that you can split your database into separate pieces. Your data can be split into pieces, and they can be located into different servers. So if you have too many users or too many files which they want to store or anything like that, you can just buy 100 additional servers, and after that all the data will be stored for your application and your users can continue working with this data. And of course there are a lot of algorithms of partitioning this data between several servers or duplication this information to make your queries really fast, caching the most frequently used information, and a lot of other useful things, but it's a topic for a separate video. Also, queries to NoSQL databases are really fast because again, your data can be duplicated, and if some data is frequently used, it can be stored in some cache, and some duplicated copy can be updated a bit later and not that often. And the consequences of such data storage is, of course, that NoSQL databases usually don't support ACID properties because again, your data is duplicated. There is some place where you store up-to-date information, but copies of this information can be updated rarely, more rarely, and of course sometimes it can store out-of-date information. It's usually not really terrible because of course nobody cares that your Instagram application shows incorrect number of likes. They will be updated in a minute and nobody will even notice it. So, but they won't be lost, but they will be updated a bit later, and it's absolutely okay if your application has millions of users. Here are examples of NoSQL databases, and again there are pretty many different NoSQL databases created during the last 20 years. Many big corporations like Facebook, Google, Amazon have their own implementation of NoSQL databases. And again, there are open source solutions, there are solutions developed by big companies, and of course, anytime you want to select some database manager, you need to think about it and make a decision which depends on your application, on your requirements. Okay, let's make a conclusion. So what's the main difference between SQL and NoSQL databases? Here is the table which shows the difference between them, and well, they are pretty simple. Yeah, because SQL databases usually have tables and query language, which allows you to manipulate with data in your tables. NoSQL databases is everything else. Usually you don't have some strict predefined language for getting information, but you can change the schema, you can add additional fields to your schema, and it isn't necessarily tables, it can be graphs or documents or anything else. The most important things to remember is that NoSQL databases are horizontally scalable. That means you can add more servers to your database to store more information. And SQL databases are vertically scalable, so you need a larger storage to store your data. So how to select the best option when you're developing your application? SQL databases is the best option if you need to support some dynamic queries, some joins, complicated filtering, selection from your data. And NoSQL databases are good, a really great solution when you need scaling. Of course, again, if you have a lot of users, You just can't put all the necessary data into one machine. You have to use noSQL database and split your data into several machines. I hope this video was helpful for you. Thank you very much for your attention and see you in the next video. Bye.